Hey, that's my bag. You just put it in the overhead compartment. I haven't touched your bag, she replied calmly. Don't lie to me, the man snapped, his voice rising. I saw you take it. Other passengers turned to look, some with curiosity, others with judgment. You don't belong here, his wife added, her tone dripping with condescension. Why are you even in first class? What they didn't know was that the woman they were accusing wasn't just any passenger. She was Veronica Clarke, a CEO whose company supplied critical airplane parts to this very airline. Her husband sat on the airline's board. She had the power to hold them accountable in ways they couldn't even imagine. And she wasn't about to let their bias go unchallenged. What would you do if someone falsely accused you like this in first class? Comment below and let us know, and subscribe for more stories where courage meets justice. Mrs. Veronica Clarke boarded first class alone, dressed casually for what she expected to be a routine flight. She had flown countless times before, but this journey would be anything but ordinary. As she passed the other passengers, she could feel the weight of their eyes. A few whispered to each other, voices just loud enough for her to hear. Who does she think she is? She doesn't belong here. She ignored them, focusing on settling into her seat. No sooner had she placed her bag in the overhead compartment than a sharp voice cut through the calm. That's my bag. You just put it in my compartment. Veronica looked at the man without surprise. I haven't touched your bag, she said evenly, her voice steady. Don't lie to me. I saw you, he shouted, leaning closer, his anger growing. A woman beside him joined in, her tone dripping with condescension. Seriously, why are you even in first class? You don't belong here. Some passengers stared in discomfort, unsure where to look. Others whispered quietly among themselves. The tension was palpable. The flight attendant stepped forward, but her expression was far from neutral. Ma'am, you need to move your bag immediately. We can't have passengers touching other people's belongings, she said sharply, her tone laced with suspicion. Veronica raised an eyebrow. I haven't touched anyone's bag. The attendant's eyes narrowed. Don't argue. We know what we saw and you're going to cooperate. Another staff member approached, smirking slightly. Honestly, first class isn't for, well, people like you, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Veronica to hear. The couple across from her whispered to each other, their contempt evident. See, I told you she doesn't belong here, the woman said. Veronica's calm didn't waver. I assure you I haven't taken anything, she said firmly, her voice carrying over the cabin. The lead attendant crossed her arms, her posture condescending. Excuse me, this isn't up for discussion. If you don't remove your bag and let us check, we're going to have to take further action. Veronica noticed several other staff watching, some openly rolling their eyes. Are you seriously accusing me, based on my appearance, of stealing in first class? She asked, her voice quiet but cutting. The staff exchanged looks and scoffed. Let's just do our job, one muttered. We don't need troublemakers here. The passengers nearby murmured nervously, some uncomfortable, some curious. The tension in the cabin had escalated. It wasn't just the couple now. It was the entire staff against her. Veronica drew a slow breath. I see, she said. I expect a formal apology, and I will ensure that everyone here is held accountable for this behavior. The other staff shifted uncomfortably, realizing the weight of her words. Even the whispering passengers stopped, suddenly aware of what had just happened. The lead attendant's face tightened, and she waved her colleague toward Veronica. Ma'am, we don't have time for arguments. You need to remove your bag now, or we'll escalate this to security. Veronica's gaze swept across the cabin. Some passengers were whispering, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. A few eyes lingered on her, trying to figure out who she was. She took a deliberate breath. Excuse me, she said slowly, letting each word sink in. I have flown this airline countless times. I have never been accused of wrongdoing, and yet here we are, judged solely because of assumptions and appearances. I have done nothing wrong, and I expect to be treated with basic respect. The staff exchanged glances, their tone growing sharper. Respect? Respect is earned, ma'am. We know what we saw. First-class passengers aren't supposed to behave like this, one said, his voice dripping with condescension. Another attendant smirked. Maybe you should have bought a regular ticket instead of pretending you belong here. Veronica's jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't raise her voice. Instead, she let them continue just long enough to make their prejudice obvious. Inside, she thought, this is exactly what I expected. Judgment before fact. But they have no idea who they're dealing with. The accuser couple leaned forward, thinking they had the upper hand. See? Even the staff agree. You don't belong in first class, the woman whispered. Veronica's voice cut through the murmurs of the cabin, cold and precise. Do you have any idea who you're accusing? I am the CEO of the company that keeps this airline flying. Every plane you step on depends on my company's parts. And my husband sits on the board. And your behavior, your false accusations, your disrespect will not go unaddressed. For a moment, silence. The accusing couple froze, mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. The flight attendants, previously so harsh and smug, suddenly looked as if the floor had vanished beneath them. One attendant stammered, we didn't. Veronica raised a hand, stopping her before she could finish. No excuses. You have humiliated me, questioned my integrity, and assumed my place based solely on appearance. That behavior is unacceptable. Passengers whispered to one another, their eyes wide. A few discreetly pulled out phones to capture the confrontation. Some looked shocked, some impressed, and a few outright nodded in silent approval. The woman accusing Veronica finally found her voice, a whisper of fear in her tone. I didn't know. You didn't know? Veronica echoed, her calm authority slicing through the cabin. Let me make sure you understand. You were judging me without evidence. You assumed I didn't belong here, and you treated me as if my presence were a crime. That, madam, is discrimination, and it will not go unaddressed. The lead flight attendant looked down, twisting her hands nervously. We will handle this immediately, ma'am. Veronica didn't move, didn't flinch. She let the weight of her words sink in. I expect a formal apology. Here, now, and I expect all staff involved to be held accountable. Every passenger in this cabin should witness that discriminatory behavior has consequences. The cabin was electric. Every whisper stopped. The couple sat rigid, their smugness evaporated, replaced with unease. Even other passengers who had been quietly judging her now looked thoughtful, some nodding subtly in respect. One brave passenger leaned forward and whispered to another, barely audible. Wow, she just shut them all down. Veronica continued, her voice unwavering, as though speaking to the entire room. And let me add this. The assumptions you make based on skin color, dress, or background, they're dangerous. They don't just hurt feelings. They can ruin careers. They can ruin lives. And right here, right now, you are witnessing the cost of that ignorance. The flight attendants glanced at each other, their harshness completely replaced by caution and fear. They could feel the power shift, the authority she radiated filling the cabin. No longer the accuser, no longer in control. They were merely observers in the wake of her command. Veronica leaned back slightly, her posture calm but unyielding. She had turned what was meant to be humiliation into a lesson, a demonstration of authority and composure under pressure. The couple looked as if they wanted to vanish. Now, she said, her voice even but sharp, apologies should be given and accountability ensured. This airline will understand today that discrimination, no matter who commits it, will meet with consequences. A soft, murmured apology came from the lead attendant. Ma'am, I apologize. Veronica didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her presence alone said everything. The couple's expressions were pale, the smug superiority gone. Around her, other passengers whispered and exchanged glances, many clearly impressed by the reversal of power. Even as the plane prepared for takeoff, the tension lingered. Some passengers quietly recorded snippets on their phones, already knowing that this moment would be shared far beyond the cabin. Veronica sat back, composed, knowing the confrontation was far from private. The airline would respond, the staff would face consequences. And the message was clear. Discrimination has a price. The lead flight attendant swallowed hard, her earlier confidence shattered. "Ma'am, we will report this immediately, and I apologize for the way we treated you." Veronica didn't reply immediately. She let the words sink in, letting the room feel the weight of her authority. Every passenger was watching now, silent and attentive. The couple who had accused her of theft sat stiffly, their faces drained of color. No whispers, no mutters, only stunned silence. She finally spoke, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. "An apology is a start, but accountability must follow. Every staff member involved needs to understand the seriousness of their actions. You judged me before knowing who I am, and that is unacceptable." The staff exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered under their breath, "We didn't think she was like this." Veronica leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with the lead attendant. "You didn't think? Let me clarify. You just assumed." That is the problem. Discrimination hides behind assumptions. Today you have learned the cost. A few passengers couldn't resist whispering to each other. "Did you hear that? She's incredible. Wow." She completely flipped the room. The accusing couple avoided her gaze, shuffling in their seats. The woman whispered, I was wrong." But Veronica didn't respond immediately. Her silence was heavy, forcing them to feel the weight of their bias. Finally, she addressed the entire cabin. "I hope everyone here witnesses the consequences of unchecked assumptions. Discrimination is not a personal matter. It affects every interaction, every decision, and every life. Today you saw what happens when someone stands firm with authority and clarity." By now, several passengers had discreetly recorded segments of the confrontation on their phones. Within hours, clips of the incident were already trending online. Comments flooded in. "She shut them down like a boss. This is exactly how you handle discrimination. Powerful, calm, and fearless." Even the airline management couldn't ignore the incident. By the time the plane landed, calls had been made. Staff involved were suspended pending review, and a formal apology was issued. Media outlets picked up the story, framing it as a viral moment of courage, authority, and accountability. Veronica sat back in her seat, her composure unbroken. She had expected resistance, even hostility, but she had also expected that authority backed by knowledge and influence could turn the tables. And it had. Passengers around her now looked at her differently. Some offered small nods of respect. Others whispered words of admiration. The couple who had accused her remained silent, their earlier arrogance replaced with shame. Veronica knew this was bigger than a single flight. Her calm, firm response had sparked conversations across social media about bias, discrimination, and accountability. It wasn't just about a luggage accusation. It was about standing up in the face of prejudice, demonstrating that authority paired with composure could command respect and enforce justice. As she disembarked, Veronica held her head high. She had not only defended herself but had set an example for everyone watching. Courage doesn't yell. It stands firm, unwavering, and lets the truth speak for itself. As the plane touched down, passengers quietly gathered their belongings, still murmuring about the confrontation they had witnessed. Some exchanged impressed glances. Others avoided eye contact with the couple who had falsely accused Veronica. Phones buzzed with notifications. By the time Veronica stepped off the plane, snippets of the confrontation were already circulating online. Clips captured her calm authority, the shocked expressions of the accusers, and the uneasy reactions of the staff. Social media erupted. Black CEO shuts down discrimination mid-flight. Watch how she handles it. This is exactly how to handle bias in first class. The look on their faces says it all. Respect where it's due. Airline management, aware that the story was trending nationally within hours, scrambled to respond. A formal statement was released. We apologize to Miss Veronica Clarke for the incident on Flight 482. Discriminatory behavior by our staff is unacceptable and will be addressed. Appropriate disciplinary actions are being taken. Veronica read the statement quietly, her expression neutral but satisfied. She had expected this outcome, but what mattered most was the broader message it sent. Bias and discrimination, no matter how subtle or hidden, would no longer go unchecked. Back at her office, the footage of the incident played on her laptop. She reflected on the confrontation. They assumed they had the power. They assumed their prejudice would go unnoticed. And they were wrong. The couple who had accused her faced a storm of online criticism. Messages flooded their social media, highlighting their behavior and forcing them into the uncomfortable reality of public accountability. Within days, discussions about bias in elite spaces, racial discrimination, and passenger rights were trending. Veronica became a symbol, not just of authority, but of courage, composure, and the importance of standing firm. She didn't stop there. Inspired by the incident, Veronica worked with the airline to implement a new passengers' respect and dignity program, designed to educate staff on bias, ensure proper protocols for disputes, and protect passengers from discrimination. Her actions sparked conversations nationwide. Social media influencers, journalists, and public figures shared her story, praising her poise, professionalism, and the way she had turned a moment of humiliation into a lesson in accountability. Even the passengers who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand spoke about it in interviews, describing the shock, the awe, and the respect they had gained for her. And through it all, Veronica Clarke remained calm, poised, and unshaken. She had faced bias head-on, turned the tables on discrimination, and reminded everyone watching that true authority doesn't shout. It commands respect through action, composure, and clarity. She knew the incident would be remembered not just for the confrontation itself, but for what it represented. Courage in the face of prejudice, authority that demanded respect, and the demonstration that standing firm with clarity and composure could force accountability even in the most hostile situations. By the end of the week, Veronica's story had inspired articles, podcasts, and discussions nationwide. The incident became more than a viral story. It became a movement. Her calm, controlled, and authoritative response became a model for professionals facing discrimination. And the airline industry took note. She didn't seek the spotlight, but it found her anyway. And the lesson was clear. When confronted with bias, composure, clarity, and authority can turn humiliation into empowerment. And one act of courage can ripple far beyond a single flight. A reminder that courage and integrity, even in the face of hostility, can transform not just a single confrontation, but the broader conversation about respect, equality, and accountability in public spaces. In the days that followed, the airline went under intense public scrutiny, held meetings to implement permanent changes. Staff underwent comprehensive bias and sensitivity training, and new protocols were established to protect passengers from discrimination. Veronica, meanwhile, continued her work, but the incident remained a defining moment. She received a note from a young professional who had watched the viral videos. It read, "Thank you. Watching you stand your ground gave me the courage to speak up against discrimination at my workplace. You showed me that strength can be calm, powerful, and dignified." Veronica smiled, quietly acknowledging that the ripples from that one flight had already spread further than she had imagined. The confrontation that began as an attempt to demean her had become a catalyst for awareness, education, and empowerment. And though she never sought fame, her story endured. It became a reminder that courage doesn't need volume. True authority is measured not by anger or dominance, but by clarity, composure, and the unwavering commitment to what is right. Veronica Clarke had faced bias, transformed humiliation into empowerment, and in doing so, inspired a movement. The world had watched and learned. The lesson was clear. When you confront prejudice with integrity, the impact resonates far beyond the moment. Courage and respect, combined with authority, have the power to change systems, shape culture, and give voice to those who have long been silenced.